Hi, guys, and welcome back to the IBS Freedom Podcast. I'm joined by this stranger that nobody knows. Just
hey guys.
Kidding. It's Amy. But give me until like the 100th episode, and it's going to be so awkward. It's going to be great. But anyway, you guys know who we are. I'm Nikki. This is Amy. We're going to talk to you about all things IBS, nutrition, etc. related. And today we're bringing to you kind of a mini episode. And mini for us, it's going to be like 40 minutes. But it's mini to us because we have another episode this week where we're going to talk to Bree, our contest winner from a couple of weeks ago over the new year. But in this episode, I was texting you the other day, Amy, and I said, I think like Nutrition Dogma would be a really fun one to play with. And I proposed this lens of kind of two flavors of nutrition advice right now, particularly as it pertains to the internet and like media and books and that kind of stuff. I think like people in clinical practice might not be this extreme, but I think that to lead us off, I'm going to propose my hypothesis. And that is that there's the world of nutrition, let's just say for the internet, but also lump in books and media. But let's say you look at like a nutritionist or a functional doctor's blog or Instagram. There's two directions I see that people take. It's either the world of like ultra hardcore, right? Like you should never see a molecule of sugar again. Like don't have it in your house. Don't have it in like your personal bubble. Don't go to stores that sell sugar, like really hardcore, like never again intense. And it can be that way with grains or gluten or fat or animal, whatever. Like it runs the gamut. But I've seen that variation of like ultra extreme. And then there's the other world, which is kind of the opposite in some ways, where it's like, oh, nutrition is hard. It's so hard. And let's just try to make it easy on everybody. And there. It's okay. We'll make it easier on you. And like kind of make it palatable to people in a weird way. Kind of food pun kind of intended. And I see that either as like the diabetes magazines. I don't know if you've seen those much, but like the diabetes magazines type things where it's like, did you know you could make muffins without oil? Just swap out, what is it they always put in? Just swap out applesauce and you're good to go. And it's like, it's still not healthy, man. There's like that, single ingredient swap out kind of like bada bing. And then there's the nutrition template world where it's like, nutrition is hard. You don't want to think about that hard stuff. Just follow our template like paleo or AIP or vegan, whatever it is. You don't have to think about it. As long as it's vegan, you're good. Or as long as it's paleo, you're automatically good. And it kind of, I feel like a lot of those templates kind of try to take away the thought process from nutrition. And that's one of the ways that they can kind of lead people astray. But that is my hypothesis. Two flavors of nutrition dogma that you see on the internet. Now I will kick it off to the actual dietitian.
Yeah, no, I think there were a couple thoughts that I jotted down when you were talking. I think the sugar thing's a really interesting one that we could go on a tangent on. I don't want to go too crazy with it, but I think like the thing that comes to mind when I hear the sugar argument is like, what's that? I feel like it's something like it causes us the same dopamine response as drugs. Like, have you heard that?
Yeah.
It's in. Again, I think whenever you're comparing sugar to drugs, that's a little bit extreme in my mind. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the people that are very anti-sugar make that association a lot. Like I always find that they're saying like, oh, it's addictive and like the devil essentially. And again, that just seems way, way extreme, like what you're saying, just kind of in the other side of things. And then if you don't have a perfect diet, then it's like
you're doomed.
Yeah, you're doomed. You're gonna have a chronic disease. You're gonna, die early or something like that. Like it's always very fear based. I feel like, mm-hmm. And I think you're exactly right. There's a level of critical thinking that you have to figure out, and I also think it just comes down to figuring out what works for your body. And a lot of the diet dogmas take you out of the equation and like your experience with the food out of the equation, it then becomes, hey, you just follow paleo and this is the perfect diet for you.
End of story.
And then, yeah, end of story. You're not really analyzing how you're doing on paleo. And a lot of times what you'll get from the paleo or vegan or whatever the
keto, I mean, they all do this, right? Carnivore.
Right. And what you'll get when you're questioning it, or if you're on any message boards or things like that, if you say like, oh, I just like really don't feel as good on this, it's usually like, well, you're doing it wrong. You have to do it this way, you know?
Yes.
It goes a step further of trying to kind of continue to disconnect you from how you're doing, how you're feeling. And I think there's
the us versus them kind of like herd mentality that gets really dangerous in this segment of nutrition in particular.
Like the echo chamber is then like, no, like this diet is the right diet. And I don't know what you're doing it wrong if it's not right for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I don't remember if I told you this story. I'm gonna spill a little bit of tea over here on the internet, people, and I'm going to keep it professional. Did I ever tell you how I was kicked out of a forum?
You did tell me this. This is a really good story.
Thank you, because I'm going to tell it again.
Okay,
so basically, internet, here's what happened, was I'm in a gajillion professional forums, and I'm sure you are too, where, you know, it's like I'm in like a SIBO practitioner forum and a million functional medicine forums, and like all of us kind of congregate in there and talk about tough cases or like what's your favorite herb for blah, and we go over clinical stuff. And I was in one that was for like a more holistic nutrition kind of field. And in there, somebody came to the group and basically said, man, like, and this was years ago, they were like, man, this really stinks. I got an email from a former client. Basically, my memory of it was that the woman said, hey, I wanted to let you know I worked with you for a period of time, and you recommended like a Western A price, like, you know, kind of paleo-ish ancestral diet, which is what this particular group preaches like the gospel 90% of the time. And she said, you know, I wanted to let you know that when I worked with you and I was doing that Western A price diet, my IBS got way worse, like way, way worse. And then I stopped working with you and I found like another nutritionist or something, and I worked with them and I actually went vegan, and my IBS is totally gone now and I feel amazing. And I want to let you know, because I think that this like one size fits all approach is not doing a service to some of your clients, and you really need to know it. And I think there might have been a little bit more of a blamey tone of like, you made me feel worse stuff. Right. And this professional came to the group and was kind of traumatized by it and was like, oh man, that's such a bummer. And it turned into the biggest echo chamber. Hundreds of people in this professional forum commenting, oh, she'll see. She feels okay now being vegan, but we know that vegan is not a healthy way to eat, and she'll feel worse, and she'll come crawling back to you. She'll see the error of her ways, but she has to get sicker to see it. And oh, itty poo on you. It wasn't your fault. She's just a big old meanie. And I'm seeing all these people chime in. And like, this is not a dumb group of people. Like, they're smart people. It's just that, you know, this particular group really, really focuses on the Western A price. If you don't know what that is, it's like vaguely similar to paleo. Way of eating, and does kind of preach it gospelish? Yeah, in a gospelish way, 90% of the time. And so this big echo chamber formed around her. And I was, I think, the only one who commented at the time. And I said, that really stinks. I hate getting those emails. Like, it takes the wind out of your sails, and you think, oh God, I'm like a failure and I didn't help this person. So I said, hey, that really stinks, and I have sympathy for that. But also, it does kind of get the mental juices going, right? Like, why on a diet that we all kind of have our reservations about, and we've seen a lot of people go vegan and feel worse, what is it about this person and her body that makes her seemingly thrive on this diet that not a lot of people can thrive on? and not do well on this other diet? And I kind of posed that as the question. And a couple of people chimed in and said, yeah. And I went about that. So then cut to, I decided this is actually a good thought exercise and a good point to be made. So I got maybe a teeny bit soapboxy, and I posted on my professional page, my Facebook page, and I just posed, I kept it anonymous. I didn't mention the profession or the group or the individual. And I just said, hey, like, nutrition dogma really, really needs to be kept in check. Like, be aware of this kind of stuff, and just kind of like check in with your own preconceived notions about nutrition and like what beliefs you have, and see if you can be willing to change some of those perhaps. And I got kicked out of the group. Somebody ratted me out to the moderators, and they thought I was being mean. And they said, our group is a safe space. And and this was like before woke was as big of a thing. This was like 2015, you guys. And I just, they basically told me, if you take down that mean post off of your Facebook page, we'll consider letting you back in the group. And I said, no, thank you. I'm good. Because it's like, my point still stands.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you're not helping this practitioner grow by just patting her on the back and saying, oh, poor you. And what freaking jerks to say, like, that lady will feel sick in no time. Maybe she won't, guys. Like, maybe she won't. And, we don't know, like, did she have SIBO? This particular client, did she have SIBO? Did she have run-of-the-mill dysbiosis and she just needed to feed her bifidobacterium and eat some plant foods and then she was good to go? Like, what was going on with that patient? But I just wanted people to explore it with curiosity instead of like, no, our diet is right and her diet is wrong and brr, 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 brr. And it's so frustrating to see that happen, because that client was right. It does not serve the general public, and it does not serve your clientele to be that rigid and think like, I know the best diet for every human being on the face of the earth. Everybody must do my thing. And it was really deeply frustrating.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting about it too is, like, in the functional and integrative space, like, there's supposed to be this notion of I'll treat the individual, like, have customized stuff. And again, we've talked about it before, like, a lot of times things get really cookie cutter and protocol-y and not necessarily individual, but diet's the same way. Like, I don't know why there's such a disconnect there, where, I mean, most of the people that I talk to, they're working with a practitioner that's like, they do keto or they do paleo, and it's like their one go-to. And I find that potentially what's going on there too is, you have people that are MDs, and again, this isn't every case, so I don't want to be too stereotypy, but I find in a lot of cases there's like MDs that don't necessarily have a deep, thorough knowledge of nutrition, but they know, oh, paleo seems to help a majority, or like they feel like they found like some sort of, diet that seems to be helpful, or leads to low inflammation. Ugh. I'm not having trouble with my words today. But yeah, so that's the frustrating part is, the idea that you're being treated as the individual, you're having customized care, but I don't see that being the case in the functional integrative space from a dietary standpoint. And there's, I think it's the same thing like that you see with low FODMAP too, when everything just comes down to like, these foods are okay to eat, these foods are bad to eat. The whole composition of the diet doesn't get looked at all. All it comes down to is like, well, are you eating paleo? But there's no look or deeper dive into like, well, what does that mean for that person? Are they eating, enough calories? Are their macros balanced? Mm-hmm. Are they getting enough fermentable fibers? Like, to your point, the person that went vegan, like, probably raised their bifido and had different plant foods in there. Like, are they getting enough of them? Are they eating, to the point you were making earlier, like a lot of paleo treats and not getting enough nutrition overall? So I just think like these dogmas, they're so broad. I mean, I work with so many people that are like paleo, keto, all different types, but a lot of times when you're in that mentality, there's still so much nutritional issues that can go on that are being overlooked because they're like, oh, well, if it's paleo, it's good and perfect.
Yeah,
inherently, right? Inherently, it's perfect. So yeah, it's frustrating to see, and I think in general, I don't want to say in general, the functional medicine integrative often the functional medicine and integrative space tends to present themselves as they're very nutrition oriented, like diet matters, which I think, again, like, that's true. They believe diet matters, but I don't think they give it as much attention and really deep diving into the composition that needs to be done from what I've seen.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is, again, like that removal of the critical thought process on both ends. I think that and I kind of get it in some ways. Like, all right, in the functional medicine space, there's heavy leaning on certain dietary templates. And even like if you go to certain training programs like the IFM, they have handouts. Like they literally have like the IFM recommended handout for the elimination diet, and like they try to make resources for practitioners to make the practitioners' jobs easier, because a lot of people are overworked, and it's, we have to run a business and see patients and have a life, and like it is a lot. So I get that like training programs like IFM, for example, will make like handouts and templates and try to make it easier on the practitioner. Like, here, now you can do nutrition too, and here's the handouts that you can give to your patients, and you only have to know this one diet. But so many of these practitioners would be better off hiring a dietitian or a nutritionist for their practice, because they don't have the time and the wherewithal and the knowledge, frankly, to go in depth. It'll be like, okay, if you're adhering to whatever diet I happen to prescribe you, you're A-okay, good to go. And that's not the case necessarily. And I see that again. I see that with paleo, like, oh, if you're doing paleo, you're automatically good. It's like, but are you?
Yeah.
But are you? So yeah, it's like removing the thought for the patient, and, like, here, follow these, and that's all there is to it. And then also removing the thought process and the effort for the practitioner and trying to make their lives easier. But like, it doesn't always translate to actual good nutrition, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I love what you were saying there. I think that, I feel as though the functional space sort of discounts a little bit like the nutrition side of things too.
I would say bastardized, honestly.
Yeah,
a bit.
Wow, you went there.
I went there.
Yeah, but I think, again, they're trying to they're kind of oversimplifying it, and to me it makes it seem like they don't really know what they're doing from that side of things. So yeah, take on a nutritionist, take on a dietitian, take on someone that can help guide people in a more in-depth way. And I think you're also right too, like, there's this idea of making things simple as a practitioner, which is appealing, and I think people can get into ruts if they're not careful of like, oh, this is easy, and but it's oversimplified. But then I also think, as like a patient or a client, the simple nature of paleo, or like being like, oh, I just have to avoid these foods, even if it's pretty tough. Like, I think, again, eating paleo, like, there is some stress involved with that, but it is kind of clear cut. Yeah. And so it's easy for someone to wrap their head around and to do, but it still can be stressful to eliminate that much food. So it's like this weird juggling act, I feel like, for people when it comes to those things. And I just think the core, like I said earlier, that the major problem that I see is that it disconnects people from their bodies in a way. They don't trust their bodies anymore. They trust all the noise from the paleo world or the keto world, or, you won't get better if you aren't low FODMAP, even if you want to go low FODMAP angle. Like, again, it's that's what's so frustrating to me, because from my standpoint, I'm constantly trying to coach people to be able to trust their bodies again. Yeah. Because they've almost been Jedi mind tricked by this whole nutrition industry and don't know what's what anymore. Yeah. So it takes some mindset switches, I think, to help really get you back into the mindset of feeling what your body's saying to you, listening to its cues.
Yeah.
Sometimes even having to like look at your nutrition, and if cues are really off, like I find a lot of times in the cases of like being strict paleo or keto and there's been like under eating with some of those, sometimes the cues get like way off in terms of like hunger cues and things like that, so it can take a little bit of time to rebuild those. But that's the really frustrating point to me. It's like that disconnect that should be like pretty natural to understand what your body's doing well with and what your body isn't doing well with. It's like it's just, it gets totally missed and lost in the sauce when it comes to all this dogma stuff.
Well, and kind of like there's almost this air of like the signals from my body are somehow less important than the thing that I've been taught.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, I'm feeling crummy on AIP, but I know this is the perfect diet for autoimmunity and I just need to steer the course. And it's like, so you're kind of teaching yourself that this external source of information is more valuable than what your body is telling you on some level, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And it can be, it's a really funky place to try to like take somebody out of that world, because it really becomes a part of you and it's like really deeply entrenched. And again, like I could see on the one hand, like not everybody wants to like log their macros and log all their food all day, every day. But I can't even finish the thought. I don't know where I was going with that. But what I'll share is, have you read any of Michael Pollan's stuff, or are you at all familiar with his stuff?
Yeah, I'm familiar with him. I know you love him.
Yeah.
Which I love his general, the ideas I do know of him. I really like his stuff.
Yeah. And I feel like the irony is like, again, you have these different outlets of like, you know, Diabetes Magazine just saying, just use applesauce instead of oil in your, you know, in your cupcakes. And then you have the world of like, don't think about nutrition. As long as it's paleo, you're good. Or as long as it's vegan, you're good. And you have this like just general tone of trying to make nutrition more palatable or more easy for people. But I feel like the irony is that you can make nutrition really easy and intuitive and not a pain in the ass. And that's one of the things that I like Michael Pollan for, is, you know, his shtick from the cover of his book: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And then throughout the books, he goes through like what all of those things mean. So like, eat food, not modified food-like products. Like a Pop-Tart is not food, but like cucumbers are food, for example. So he'll kind of go through what all those things mean, but that's oftentimes where I'll send people. Like, you know, I remember this guy, he was doing, he had done paleo, I think, and keto, and he had eventually landed on carnivore. And he was like, I don't know what to eat. I don't know what to eat. Because when he did carnivore, he didn't poop for a month.
Yeah.
A month.
Yikes.
And he did carnivore for 3 months. He pooped 3 times in 3 months doing carnivore. But he was like, I don't know what to believe, because like oxalates are bad and histamine is bad and grades are bad and also legumes are bad and like phytate is bad. And he's like all entrenched in all the stuff. And he just shrunk his diet down to carnivore. And he was like, I don't know what to eat. I don't even know if this is healthy. And I was like, oh, it's not healthy, but like, but that was one of the things. Like, I very frequently will send people links to Michael Pollan speaking on YouTube, like talks that he's done, where he just kind of brings nutrition up in like a very laid back, chill, but really practical way of like, you know, it doesn't need to be this thing full of dogma. It's literally just like, eat actual food, and that's kind of all you need to worry about in a way. So I just find that like all of these attempts to make nutrition easier or more palatable are kind of in vain. And then somebody has done this years ago, and he brought it to the world really eloquently. He wasn't the first, he won't be the last, but I just really like a lot of the ways that he puts stuff in his books. And I know there's a term, I don't think he coined it, but he mentions it in the book, and that is the term nutritionism. Like this belief that you don't know about nutrition, And therefore you need experts like us to teach you about nutrition because it's like this scientific, difficult thing, and like normal people can't possibly understand nutrition, so you need to pay us the big bucks to tell you what to eat. And it, not that I like don't want to have a job, but also I feel like most people actually intuitively know what to eat when they get through the layers of bullshit and trauma and dogma and stuff that's been placed upon them over the years of working with practitioners or just being on the internet. Or being sick.
Right. And I even think like just diet dogma too, like the diet culture and all that stuff. I mean, you grow up hearing like lower calorie. So, and that's from the vein of, I see a lot of undereaters. Like, I think there is like this natural tendency to think, oh, if you're low calorie, that's healthy. Or that you're eating lower calorie foods. And if you then swap to like a whole foods diet, that's usually a higher volume compared to like processed foods. Sometimes people can be under eating because there's been those like diet culture dogma stuff in the mix since they were younger and things like that. So I think you're totally right though. I mean, nutrition, we used to not have like a science of nutrition, like we didn't have dietitians forever. Like what did people do before dietitians? I feel like that is
family.
Right. And I think that one of the funny things about like that you're mentioning Weston A. Price stuff, like, I mean, his research is really interesting, kind of proves that people can have all different varieties of foods that they're eating and still not really have chronic disease as long as the foods are nutrient dense. So it's, you're right. It's been overcomplicated in, trying to sell you certain diets and certain ideas that aren't overly helpful and that kind of, instead of putting faith in your body and how you feel when you're eating a certain way, you put your faith in these diets, and that's kind of hard
or the experts.
Right. It's hard to unwind once you've done that.
Yeah. Well, and you're kind of surrendering your power to those people too.
Yeah.
Like I don't trust myself anymore. I don't feel like I have the power to make this decision. I'm going to hand the power over to, Chris Kresser or whoever it might be. Yeah. No offense to Chris Kresser. But like, whatever celebrity is endorsing whatever diet you want to embark on. And yeah, it's a lot. Like that's a big kind of foundational thing. Like when you surrender your power to another entity or another human being, like that changes you down to the bone, I feel like, on some level. And that's why it's so hard to pull people back out of that mentality, because it really is a very deep shift when you make that unconscious choice to surrender that to somebody else. And it's kind of like you have to have the cojones to say, no, I'm gonna take this back from this imaginary person, and like I'm gonna start making these choices myself. I'm good enough, I'm strong enough, I'm smart enough. And so there's kind of like a self-confidence element to it too sometimes.
For sure. You have to be able to trust yourself. And I wanted to say trust your gut, but sometimes people in our circles don't trust their gut.
That's a whole nother thing we could talk about another day too, is like actually trusting your gut and having some empathy for what your digestive system is going through. And trust that it is trying to do the right thing. But yeah, I think that there's, and I've said this before, I think that there's a lot of practitioners who are very well intentioned, but maybe not well equipped. Like, again, like, you picture the functional medicine doctor, and even honestly, you said MDs. I would lump in most functional doctors. Like, I got another certification in nutrition, but most people who practice functional medicine, including chiropractors, including acupuncturists, including, I'm going to leave somebody out and they're going to be pissed now. I mean, like DOs, NPs, PAs, like none of us have as much nutrition training as a nutritionist or a dietitian would. So unless that person went out and got a whole other certification or degree in nutrition, the odds that they're going to be as well equipped to handle this kind of stuff, like the nitty gritty stuff that we talk about, it's iffy. But I think that they're well-intentioned. I think that, like, you know, I've seen MDs, for example, like kind of go from conventional, and then like I meet them at their first IFM conference and they're like, my mind is blown, nutrition does stuff, whoa, probiotics work, literally, and like they're so pumped and like they want to bring this to the world, but like they don't have that foundation and that training. They're like, oh, we had like a 1-hour nutrition lecture one time in medical school 8 years ago, but then they get so acutely excited and like pumped up at a conference that they're like, I'm going to bring nutrition to the world, healthy eating matters. And then that's kind of where, you know, the companies are like, oh, here's this handout. Don't worry about it. Just have people follow our diet plan. And that practitioner is just like, okay, like, cool. Right. I'm like overwhelmed with the prospect of changing literally everything about the way I practice. So of course I'm going to take those resources and tools and I'm going to try to use them. But you know, even amongst people with IBS, like how many people do you have that actually follow the exact same diet? Hardly any. Like I have some patients who have to be more mindful of oxalates. I have some patients who need to be more mindful about histamine. I have some people who genuinely are sticking to low FODMAP right now. I have some people who are doing combo diets. I have some people where I'm just like, eat all the plant foods you can, go for it.
Right.
And like, even within the world of having the same diagnosis, there needs to be some tailoring because humans are just different.
Right. And I think like I even think back in my own journey to like the functional practitioner that I worked with first. Again, I just don't think we jived from the beginning, but they gave me this very strict meal plan that was like essentially SIBO specific. It was like the combo of the SCD and low FODMAP. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I'm like dead set on like getting rid of this thing. I'm going to do it hardcore. Okay. Continue to lose weight, continue to feel awful on this diet, kept coming back, and like never really suggested a dietary shift over time. And again, like getting seriously like underweight for my size. And I remember one day he was just like, why don't you try like some hummus? Like after I haven't been eating any of this stuff like for a while, and how triggering that was to me. Like seems like what do you mean? Like this diet was supposed to be like it, you know, like I can't just go ahead and add beans in, like that's gonna feed SIBO or whatever. Like I got into that mindset hardcore. Yeah. And I think that that's probably a struggle too for some practitioners to have the ability to guide someone on like the process of reintroduction from a mindset, but also a physiological standpoint. Like I think both of those things can be hard to overcome. So even that process of like, if you know the diet's a little bit limiting and you want to experiment, like it's not as simple as just telling someone sometimes like, oh, you just throw in a couple more things, like if their mindset's not right. Yeah.
Well, and if they're terrified too.
Right. Like, right. They got SIBO diet trauma.
Yeah. Well, and even just like within the FODMAP world, like, okay, what food do you start with? Like, I mean, I have different ways of doing it with different people, but oftentimes if we're trying to be really strategic and we're really thinking that we have to kind of tiptoe through this reintroduction process, as an example, I won't have people start with onion and garlic right away because those are like really FODMAP-y. I mean, on the scale of like how much FODMAPs something has, I mean, like onion and garlic are pretty freaking high up there. And I wouldn't have them start with wheat either. But like maybe I have them start with, I don't know, like an apple slice or, you know, an eighth of an avocado. Like you could even pick, like, it's not just this free for all of, oh, just like throw shit in whenever. Oftentimes, and I do the same thing like with the oxalates, with the histamine. Like there are things that have a lot of histamine and there are things that have like a medium amount. And if you kind of go about it in the right way, it could be done. But if you start your reintroduction with like the most histamine laden food ever, you're going to hate life possibly. Right.
Like you wouldn't start with sauerkraut or something like that.
Yeah. Like don't start there. But I do find that too. And this is maybe a good point to wrap up with, is that and I've seen this too. I think that the effort to make nutrition easier and more palatable also comes from that there's a lot of people who frankly are not willing to put in the work that it's required. And this is probably not like our viewership, because people who have IBS and they've tried low FODMAP, they've tried a CD, they've tried whatever, like you people are probably like willing to do practically anything. But, you know, when I was working with people who didn't have IBS and they had like maybe Hashimoto's or something, not anything against those people, but I did have some patients where like I literally recommended, hey, try to go gluten-free for like a month. And you would have thought I asked them to barbecue their own eyeballs and eat them. Like there was just, they were like, what? And it gets really frustrating from the clinician side, because like I care about your health and I think this would really, really help you, but you're not willing to do the thing. Like, why are you paying me money if you're not willing to do the thing? Like, I don't get what my role is in life anymore. Like, why are you talking to me even? And just like, and I've seen it too, like Whole30 is a great example of this. I think every person I've ever talked to, that I can think of in my mind at least, every person I've ever talked to who mentions, well, I did a Whole30 once, every single time they say, well, I did the Whole30, but when I got to the reintroduction phase, I just didn't do that. Like they'll do the elimination part of it and they'll like muster through the 30 days and they'll push through the 30 days. But when it gets to the actual process, the part where you listen to your damn body, right? Like when you start reintroducing stuff one at a time, that's when you have the opportunity to listen finally. And that's like the most insightful part of the Whole30.
Right.
Every single person I've ever talked to is like, well, I did Whole30 once. And I'm like, oh, how did that go? And they're like, oh, yeah, it was pretty good. Oh, well, I didn't do the reintroduction phase. I just like, I had pizza the next day. And I was like, why?
Right.
You missed out on this huge opportunity. And that is, you know, I do see some people are in that space. And if you're not sick and miserable enough that you want to like do the Whole30 the correct way, like I kind of get that. But also you're just not going to get any value out of that experience then. If you're going to do the difficult thing of like eliminating all those foods for a period of time, you might as well do the reintroduction with some effort and thought behind it. Otherwise, like, what was the point?
Right. I think it's that gray area, that gets a little bit tricky. Like, even with low FODMAP, like, the reintroduction gets tricky. Like, they know how to be off of FODMAP and on FODMAP, but, like, what's that weird in between where I'm, like, figuring out on my own what works and what doesn't. And I think, I will say, too, I did want to make this quick point before we have to jump off. I do think that typically people can have some wiggle room. So, like, going back to that sugar, us talking about sugar, like, I don't think sugar is necessarily evil. I think everyone's gonna have, you don't have to have a perfect diet. So I don't think that's usually my goal with my clients at all, is for them to be perfect. It's more like, okay, if you can eat 80 to 90% this way and then have, like, you know, 10% wiggle room. Yes, the wiggle room I think is key. I do think that typically helps with like being able to stay on a diet, or like making a lifestyle switch to a particular style of eating, and kind of getting attuned to that. Having some wiggle room, I think, reduces stress around like eating healthier and, you know, still having like a little bit of treats. It's not wrong to treat yourself. I think that can be super important too, and it depends on where you're at in your journey too. So maybe like you have 10% wiggle room if you're kind of in the midst of IBS and things like that, and then you can extend it to like 20% as you get better. And everyone's going to be a little bit different of what foods can be counted in the wiggle room foods. But
like for me, gluten cannot be in the wiggle room.
Right. Exactly.
Ever. Like
exactly.
That's how it has to be.
That's how the cookie crumbled.
Yeah, there are the gluten-free cookie for me. Yeah. But yeah, you know, I think there's no pure nutritional evil and there's no pure nutritional good. I think that there's general templates. Again, I really like eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Right. I think that that's a good template for like 99% of humanity. Yeah. And then there's going to be caveats and nuances. Like, again, like some people have to be a little bit more mindful of the histamine. Some people need more fiber than the average bear. And like, it's just, you have to kind of figure out what your body craves, what it needs, and try to whatever ability you can, just try to tune in and listen to your body again. And we, in this day and age, we have been taught from a very young age to not listen to our body. And it's hard to get back in tune with that when you've lived your life up until this point ignoring your body and its cues or judging it. Like, oh, I have a headache. My stupid body has a headache. Or like, oh, my gut is, why don't you digest your food anymore?
Right.
Like this very like blamey, like if you do listen to your body, you're going to lash back out at it kind of.
Right.
I see that quite a lot too.
I think the one I hear a lot too is like, I'm a sugar addict. Like I do, or like I crave sugar. And sometimes that can be a blood sugar that I'm usually flagged of like, okay, we need to make sure that there's not blood sugar swinging.
Yeah.
It's not only just blood sugar, but sometimes people are like, oh, I'm like craving sugar all the time. And then we're looking at their diet and it's not sufficient in carbs. It's not sufficient in overall calories. So like, of course their body would be like, you're craving carbs. That makes sense. Yeah. So you're exactly right. Listening to those cues sometimes is harder with all the noise out there.
Yeah. And I think for everything that the internet has given us, for which I'm grateful, it can make life a bit more confusing, especially when it comes to your health. But Amy, my dear, we have to wrap up like nowish because we're going to go talk to Bree about her gut. So guys, again, this is a 2-part week. This is one episode. I don't know what number we're on anymore. So this is one episode, our musings. And now we're going to jump over and talk to Bree about her gut health. She was the winner from our New Year's contest that we did on Instagram. Holler at us at ibs.freedom.podcast on Instagram. And you know the drill. If you're watching this on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up or an arrow up or whatever it is on YouTube. Subscribe, comment, do whatever you do on YouTube. And if you are listening on iTunes or a podcasting app, if you could give us 5 stars, that would be fantastic, and that would help us reach more people. So, Amy, I will see you momentarily. Let's go talk to Bree, shall we? Hey guys, Dr. Daneza here. So when we recorded this mini episode, we told you that we would have another episode dropping this week where we spoke with Bree, our contest winner, but the audio came out really kind of craptacular for that. So we're actually not going to post it as an audio episode. That's going to be a YouTube exclusive episode. You'll have to kind of bear with some subpar audio quality from that, but it's still a worthwhile conversation. We had a lot of fun talking with Bree and helping her with her irritable bowel syndrome symptoms and IBS, SIBO stuff. So if you could go ahead and check that out, that is on YouTube. And the YouTube channel is the same name as the podcast. It's the IBS Freedom Podcast channel on YouTube. And while I've got you here, I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be doing a webinar, 3 keys to ensuring SIBO success. That is going to be next week, starting on February 15th, 2021. If you would like more information, I'm going to be posting on my Instagram page at Triangle Guts, Guts, and that is, I almost said .com. Oh my God, I'm so old. Instagram is at Triangle Guts, not .com. I am not that old. And I will be posting some information about that webinar and how you can register and check that out. But it's called 3 Keys to SIBO Success. And I think it's going to be really, really helpful. So if you'd like to check that out, I will be posting information on my Instagram profile this week. And hopefully I'll see you there. But in the meantime, go ahead and check out our YouTube channel with that interview with Bree. And you can see a little bit of us in action. We're kind of tag teaming the appointment and helping Bree with her IBS and SIBO symptoms. Take care.